On a special TXWaterpolo podcast, as we're all looking for things to do, we speak with Peter Hudnut, 2008 Olympian, Stanford standout, and, according to Wikipedia, John Thomas Dye Elementary School graduate. It's good to share details like that on Wikipedia. Plus, he and his Harvard Westlake teammates trained in Texas back in the 90s and recently led a clinic in Houston. He and I spoke back in December when I had a dodgy connection and some ancient earbuds, so the quality is even more subpar than usual. But Peter and I discussed his connections with Texas, his Olympic experiences, and a lot more. So here we go. It's James Smith with the TXWaterpolo podcast and a special guest today. We're going to talk with Peter Hudnut, two-time Olympian and former All-American at Stanford, who was just in Houston doing a camp. So welcome aboard.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to connect with the water polo community out there and broadly through your blog.
Right, cool. So that's the deal. It's like you were asked to come to Houston, I think by Houston Storm is the club that brought you into town. So tell us a little bit about your experience. How'd things go?
Yeah, it was a great experience. So I do a bunch of coaching and camps with some of my former teammates, mainly Tony Azevedo, and sort of through him that I got connected to the club. Came out, we had three-hour sessions where we ran kids through a number of fundamentals, skill building, shooting technique training, as well as a 6-8 challenge, which is sort of becoming the combine of our sport.
Right.
It's run through 6-8 sports, and it's basically a way to not only track kids' skills, abilities, and times, but also for me as a position coach, it's a great opportunity to give meaningful feedback to each athlete and give them a few drills that they can work on to really improve their game. The weekend itself was amazing. The 45 kids we had were all motivated, tons of questions. They did everything we asked of them and more. The effort and enthusiasm was great. And I was very surprised at the skill level and the enthusiasm to learn. I think during winter break, you kind of get that mix of some kids who kind of would rather be on break sleeping in. And we had 20 some odd kids at 6:45 on a pool deck on a Saturday morning. I mean, it was incredible. Great experience. The club was great. The parents were great. I hope to actually make it a twice a year thing. I'd love to come out and reach more kids.
Wow, fantastic. And I think Tony's been out here, or at least in Dallas on occasion as well. So it sounds like 6-8 might be making its presence felt in the state of Texas.
Yeah, Tony and Adam, I know, come to Dallas, I think once a year. I know Brenda Villa has come out once or twice, as well as Janai Kerr. And, I think it's a bastion for great athletes, and especially there seems to be quite a swim presence in Texas. And, I think anywhere that the sport is growing, we hope to be and hope to help people reach their potential.
Very good. And was it your first time in Texas for anything water polo related?
So I've been to Texas 2 other times. One was for the onboarding and outfitting for the 2007 Pan American Games, which were in Rio de Janeiro. We all went and trained for a day and got a bunch of gear and then left. So not really spending much time in Houston, but we were there for that. And then 21 years ago, 1998, I was in high school. I was going into my senior year at Harvard Westlake, and our Harvard Westlake team came to Houston and trained with Coach Landgraf's team, whose name is escaping me. I can't remember where.
Yep, Clear Lake. That's a great story.
Clear Lake, yeah. And Tom and Rich go way, way back, and it was a great probably 5 days of training, and also we got to see the city, went to the NASA Space Center, where a water polo player toured us around, former astronaut Steve Smith, I think. Smith is his last name. But it was a great opportunity. We got a lot of weather. I remember it rained more there in the 3 or 4 days we were there than it did in 2 years at Los Angeles, so that was great.
Right.
So been there a few times, but it was wonderful to be back.
What a great story. You and I talked about it a little bit before, but that was a surprise because there has been some connection between teams from California and Texas over the years, but 98 was not a year that I suspected that was going to take place. So really interesting that Harvard Westlake decided to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously Rich Corso and Landgraf's relationship helps, but also I think,
sure.
One of the lucky things I think about my water polo career with a guy like Rich Corso is not only is he a phenomenal and brilliant water polo mind, but even now in his 60s, he is a little kid with his enthusiasm for the sport and for growing the sport. I think what he really instilled in all of us is that the sport is about pushing boundaries. It's about being part of something greater than any individual, right? Even with the best players in the world like Tony Azevedo, he can't grab a rebound, take it all the way down, juke everyone, and score like in basketball, right?
Right.
You're really reliant on your team and that camaraderie. And because of that, we were lucky enough to travel to various places, Houston being one of them, and really create more relationships with local teams.
Very cool. Yeah, crap. Hold on one second. I lost my train of thought.
All good. I talk too much.
No, you're good. Really good. Damn it, I had two questions. Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Right, and Harvard Westlake, actually, when the decision was made in October that the UIL, which is the equivalent of the CIF in the state of Texas, was going to add water polo as its next official sport, who were the two teams who tweeted immediately that they'd be interested in a trip to Texas? One was Newport, one was Harvard Westlake. So it sounds as though that's almost a cultural thing. It's something that they like to do is to get out of the state and go play somebody else.
Absolutely. Well, Brian Flax, I remember coaching. He's a coach at Harvard Westlake. I remember coaching him when he was an age group.
Wow.
And I know Rich Corso was a big influence on not only his water polo education, but also I'd say his style and philosophy. And what Brian's done with the Harvard Westlake program is pretty incredible. And his enthusiasm, much like Rich's and to a certain extent mine, to continue to grow the sport as well as provide better opportunities for his players and other players is, I think, transforming part of the sport of water polo. And Harvard Westlake kids should consider themselves lucky. But
very lucky. Well, and you're a lucky guy too. So Stanford AllAmerican, they just won their first title in 12 years.
17 years.
17. Thank you for the correction.
Well, the only reason is my senior year was the last title they won.
Right.
Had some phenomenal teams between now and then. But, hats off to those guys and to John Vargas. I loved him, loved playing for him. I know some of those guys like Ben Halleck, and they're a great team. They worked their tail off, and it was great to see them win.
I don't think I love him as much as you do. He was the coach at Corona Del Mar my senior season at Wilson, and they beat us in the semis for CIF championship. So a little bit less of a fan maybe than you are.
Well, he's a tough guy, and I was I'd say more intimidated by him until I played with him, and that bond. I only played for him for about 18 months, and that bond we created though was pretty meaningful, and he definitely impacted my game. And I've been very lucky. I grew up playing for Rich Corso, then Ricardo Azevedo, and Dante for 2.5 years at Stanford, and then John Vargas for 1.5 years at Stanford. So it's very, very lucky educational program that I had. All of those guys are great coaches, impacted my game.
Almost Hall of Fame. I think all of them. Yeah, that's incredible. We're at the midpoint of our conversation with Peter Hudnut, and we'll return with more after this important message from someone who sounds like Sam Elliott.
Right about now, you might be expecting some song and dance about a product you don't need. Well, shush, we don't advertise here, and we want to keep it that way, so we sure would appreciate your help. Show your support by going to TXWaterpolo.com/donate so we can keep covering the sport we love in the great state of Texas.
And now more with 2008 Olympian Peter Hudnut.
And that led you, after those successes at the collegiate level, of course, to the USA national team. And I've already gushed about this, I think, with you in person, before we got online here, and with other people. 2008 is when the blog Total Water Polo started, and was by far my favorite. And which is interesting because I actually worked at the 1984 Olympics, so I saw pretty much every game there when that team won a silver medal. But it was a little bit of a letdown at the time because the Soviet Union wasn't playing, and there was a boycott and all of that. And then, of course, they tied Yugoslavia in the final game. And at the time, that was the rules were such that it wasn't a championship match per se; it was a rankings match. So a tie at 5-all gave them the silver medal. It was very disappointing. But your experience in Beijing is my favorite, and my all-time favorite game is the semifinal win that you were succeeded at against Serbia.
Yeah, that game. I mean, so I actually don't have any of the game film from any game in 2008. And there's certain parts of the games that you remember, and there's certain parts where you're so in the zone. We used to call it playing in the white, where you're so play-by-play connected to the game that I actually don't remember a lot of the game, other than that game against Serbia was probably the greatest game of my career. And I think I only took one shot from 9 meters, so I didn't score. But for me, it was just thrilling because the connectivity that we all had with each other as a unit, and the belief that we all had in each other and in what we were doing, and the willingness to just put it all out there and go for gusto, right? Leave that pool with no energy left. I mean, it was the best defensive. I switched from 2-meter offense to 2-meter defense around 2005, 2006. Mm-hmm. And that was hands down the best game of my career. My U.S. national team career, for sure, which was about 12 and a half years long. That was for sure my best game. And it was just, an incredible opportunity. We had 3 coaches in the 4 years preceding the 2008 Olympic Games.
Right.
We had some funding issues. A lot of people at home weren't necessarily believing in us, and we knew we had it in us. And that summer leading up to the games, we started to really turn some heads and prove to everyone that we were strong individual players and a very, very strong team. So it was a great dynamic. That game is incredible too.
What do you remember, if anything, about you had a plan to attack Serbia, and you're clearly indicating that it went to plan, that things went as you expected. What do you remember about that? I mean, it was part of your amazement that, like, hey, this is actually really working well.
So I think we had truth be told, is we had a deep belief in our system, which was somewhat similar to Serbia's system. We didn't really do the, major run and gun like Hungary. We slowed it down a little more. We tried to really control the directions of their shots, their balls, and really tried to almost suffocate them with our pressure, because we knew we were fit and we knew that we were a solid team and had each other's back. I think the thing about that game is we'd been playing them close, and we'd beaten them once or twice leading up to the Olympics. But overall, if you looked at the previous 8 years, the games we played against them, we maybe won 10% of those games, not even.
Yeah.
And to come in and rout them so thoroughly like we did. I mean, I say, had we won a gold, the Miracle on Ice, no offense, 2 in the world, and they beat the Russians, right?
Right.
College kids. Well, we were number 8 in the world, and we beat Serbia, and that was without question one of the greatest, I think, upsets of that Olympics, if not last few Olympics.
I completely agree with that. Yeah, that was a moment, and if you haven't had the chance, go check out on YouTube. There are some highlights. They're not terribly good, unfortunately, but and I'm afraid I'm going to have to give it to your teammate here. But Jeff Powers had this shot at about 8-9 meters with 5 minutes left in the game, and he got fouled. Yeah, and just absolutely killed it high corner. You can actually hear, it sounds like a chest of drawers closing. And not only did you hear the shot, but you could just see Serbia deflating completely. The game was over.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And Jeff is one of those guys. He has, there's a few other guys like Jeremy Pope and Ryan Bailey will claim he's up there. But Jeff has one of the most hard, powerful shots. I'll rib him a little bit in that he doesn't always know where it's going, but he can get some heat behind the ball, and that was it. I mean, I think that's one of the things about that game is everyone contributed. Everyone kind of, at national team levels, you have a bunch of individual great players who come together and try to perform, and sometimes there's a level of, I think, selfishness or ego that goes into it. And I think there's examples of that in certain teams. But our team really put the ego aside. Guys weren't worrying about how many goals they were scoring. They weren't worried about even performance other than just execution, right? You made a mistake. It was water off a duck's back. No one was laboring on that mistake. You moved on. You moved forward. And I think to have guys like, a wealth of experienced Olympians really put ego aside and just battle. And that's what that game was. That's what that Olympics kind of signified, was the selfless, aggressive style of our American team and our willingness to go until there's nothing left.
Well, and that's a style that you can also see in the gold medal match, which is maybe less a fond memory than the Serbian semifinal. But you were close with Hungary for well over 3 quarters. What's your recollection from that game?
I think same thing. I think the concern after such a big win in the semifinals is you don't want to let down that momentum, because there's a certain part of some people's brain that was like, oh my gosh, we're leaving with a medal no matter what. And that's a very dangerous place to be in when you come from the background of most people don't expect you to even perform that well. I mean, my own father was scheduled to leave that day. He had to reschedule and pay a fortune to reschedule his flight and postpone some business he was doing in order to see the final game. So
wow,
we really showed him. I didn't know that until after the Olympics. Otherwise, I would have had some more choice words with him. But yeah, that gold medal game. I mean, look, it is an incredible thing to compete and represent your country in the Olympic Games. It is next level to do so when battling for a medal. I mean, face facts. The United States responds to medal performances more so than incredible efforts, right?
Yeah.
And there's definitely some weight to that in the gold medal match. However, at the same time, it was, Hayes in the barn. Let's go to work. Let's do everything we can to captivate to win every possession.
Right.
And we were executing our game plan flawlessly. I think, some guys will there's some debate as to when the moment broke. During that third quarter, we tried to run and gun with them a little bit, and there were 2 quick misses on our part that they countered down and scored.
Right.
And that was a huge momentum shift. And, look, Hungary at that Olympics, their team was without question the best in the world. That team was pretty much the same team as 4 years earlier and pretty much the same team as 2000. Arguably one of the best teams, if not the best team in history.
Right.
And we battled them. And I'm very proud of how we did. But yeah, it's frustrating because, in team sports, you lose the gold, right? As
You don't win
swimmer,
the silver, right?
Swimmer, you get your PR and you lose to someone, but you're still getting your PR and you're winning that silver. The silver medal in team sports is a little. I've talked to Terry Schroeder about this a number of times. It's still it's something that just kind of sits on you for a little bit.
Right.
And we, 2 or 3 possessions change, and that whole game could have potentially changed. So it's a little frustrating, but the energy, the camaraderie, the success that we as a group had through a lot of trial and tribulation, and I'm talking about 8 years of grinding as young college kids through 2004, which I was alternate on. I did not make that team. And then to 2008. I mean, battling for a gold with your brothers, no matter the outcome, is just something I cherish for the rest of my life, for sure.
What a memory. Yeah. So, Peter Hudnut, 2-time Olympian and a recent visitor to Houston, and hopefully you'll come back again and we'll meet face to face. But thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. It was a blast.
Thanks for listening and telling a friend about the TX Waterpolo podcast, and be sure to visit TotalWaterpolo.com, our other site, to find some very useful educational materials and, of course, news and features about water polo throughout the United States. And if you're wondering why we end the show with this music, well, that's Playground by 12 Hour Mary, whose lead singer is Brett Bixby, standout water polo player at Long Beach Wilson High School back in the 80s and my former bandmate. So go check out his solo work at myspace.com/Brett Bixby.
Turn my head again, I'm changing lanes, passing through the time I can't afford to lose. Just imagine all the things that we could do if I could spend it on myself and you. Trying to turn the world into a playground with all my might. Tables are turned and the ride is on the way round. Hold on tight, waiting in line.
This has been a production of TWP Sports LLC.